So will a shift in position from the US bring about actual change on the ground? I've been speaking to Yuriy Sak, former advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Strategic Industries.
It was a powerful message at a very important moment in this war. It's actually staggering to think that it's almost been so long as the war that the Soviet Union had during the Second World War. And in that period of time, of course, Ukraine has benefited greatly from the support of our allies. And the platform in New York is still a very powerful platform which allows countries to deliver their message directly to the leaders of other countries.
So President Zelensky seemed to echo what President Trump was saying yesterday about the weakness of the United Nations and its failure to take on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine.
Well, I think you don't have to be a scholar of international law or international relations to come to that conclusion, at least in the sphere of the UN's main responsibility according to its charter, which is the preservation of international peace and security. And it's obvious if you look at the composition of the Security Council, which is the main body of the UN, which is supposed to make these decisions, that is supposed to keep us all safe. The country which has committed a crime of aggression, one of the most egregious crimes on the book of international law, Russia, is sitting on the Security Council. So that, of course, renders the UN irrelevant in matters of peace and security. But there are other areas where the UN is doing a great job, things like global health. And actually, I have to say that even in the Ukrainian context, there were some cases where the UN has played a role when it comes to the exchange of prisoners or when we were trying to broker the so-called grain deal.
Well, what about what President Trump said at the UN yesterday? I mean, he, for the first time, said that he believed that Ukraine could get back all the territory that had been seized and occupied by Russia. Do you see that as a significant shift?
It is a tremendously significant shift because if you compare where we were in our relationships with the White House even 6 months ago and where we are now, it's a different universe. It all started with that infamous, unfortunate meeting in the Oval Office. Donald Trump approaching the Russia's war on Ukraine on the premise that Russia is a superpower, it has a huge army. So at the beginning of his tenure, Donald Trump was convinced that Ukraine is too small, too weak to resist such a great power as Russia. And what we heard yesterday didn't actually surprise us because for us it was just a matter of time when Donald Trump would come around and understand that he's being tapped along, that he's being lied to, that Putin is a pathological liar. Once this realization came, I think Donald Trump realized that he's looking at the map of the front line in Ukraine, the one that he himself saw in January 2025 when he was inaugurated, and he compares it with the map now, and he can see that Russia has achieved almost nothing.
Russia does occupy around a fifth of what was Ukrainian territory, but we've been hearing from President Trump in recent weeks his increasing exasperation with President Putin. Doesn't he need, if he is going to make any difference to this war, to back that up with action, whether that be financial or providing much more military support to your country or imposing those really tough sanctions on Russia?
Absolutely, and that's what we hope will be the next stage of Donald Trump's frustration with Russia's unwillingness to approach the peace process in good faith. We understand that the US has leverages that it can use to make it very difficult, if not impossible, for Russia to prosecute this war. And we've all heard actually yesterday that there are things like oil and gas trade, there are things like additional sanctions. So, of course, we hope that yesterday's statements will, with time, hopefully sooner than later, translate into real actions. And we have seen actually immediately after that statement was made by Donald Trump, a lot of support for that statement and almost jubilation in the ranks of the Republican Party, because there are very serious members of both houses of the Parliament, of the Congress in the US who are strongly supportive of imposing more sanctions on Russia and imposing more tariffs on those countries which are trading with Russia and in doing so enable Russia to prosecute this war.
Do you think that Ukraine really can force Russian forces out of the territory that they currently occupy?
At some point, we will be able to do that, but that point is not tomorrow. We have done a great job building up our own defense industry in the last couple of years. The progress that we've made in that field is actually miraculous. As a result, we're capable of destroying Russian oil refineries and their military facilities on a daily basis. And this, of course, is making a serious dent in Russia's war machinery. So if our military capacity is coupled with the sanctions and the economic and diplomatic measures that will be used by our partners, we will cripple Russia to such an extent we will not even have to fight for our land. They will have to vacate, to leave the illegally occupied parts of Ukraine voluntarily. On the one hand, it's wishful thinking on my part, but at the same time, we are realistic that for now, we are unable to evict Russians militarily. But at the same time, we have said it many times, we will never recognize their title to the lands of Ukraine that they have illegally annexed. And there will come a day when all of our lands will be back in our fold, including Crimea.
Just finally, we've seen recently a number of Russian incursions into NATO airspace, NATO areas. Do you think that those drones, those jets that are intruding on NATO airspace should be shot down?
I think that's for the NATO countries to decide. We have been saying to our partners in NATO for a long time that it is much, much better and safer for everyone if those drones will be, and missiles, if they will be shot down in the Ukrainian skies. This is why we have tried to convince our partners in Europe, in the US, to close the Ukrainian skies, to use the NATO airborne capacity to shoot down these deadly drones and missiles in our skies. That way, they will not have to deal with them on their border.
Yuriy Sak, former advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Strategic Industries.
The Danish defence minister has said that a professional actor was behind drones flown near the country's airports and military airbase. Troels Lund Poulsen told a news conference that the hybrid attack was part of a systematic operation, but said that the devices were launched locally and stopped short of blaming Moscow. Russia has been accused of violating European airspace several times in recent weeks. Well, Elizabeth Rushton is covering the story for The Times, and she joins me now. Elizabeth, hello.
Hi there, Hugo. Morning.
Morning. Tell us about, afternoon here. Tell us about the drones' flights. Where were they? The Defence Minister said they were a hybrid attack. What does that mean as well?
Yes, so there are 5 different sites that are being included in this this latest drone incident. Probably the most prominent being Aalborg Airport, right in the north of the country, which is the 3rd busiest airport and also used by the Danish military. That was closed for a few hours overnight after 9:44 p.m. last night. That was when the drones first appeared. And yes, they were also seen then at smaller airports in the south of the country, Zonderburg, Esbjerg, and then possibly also a bit more concerning the Skridstrup Air Base, which is home to most of Denmark's combat jets. So yes, it's a situation that a lot of local residents have said is quite concerning. Opposition politicians calling it pretty embarrassing for the government that this has happened, the 2nd time in a matter of days, in terms of what that shows about their ability to defend against these mysterious drone appearances.
And look, given that they were flying near sort of military bases, Air Force bases, why weren't they shot down? Has anybody said?
Yes, well, it was the police commissioner also spoke at the press conference this morning, where we, as you said, heard from the defence minister and the justice minister as well, and he said that they were prepared and able to shoot the drones down, but decided not to because of the risks that could be involved for some of the aircraft below, aircraft fuel being ignited, some of those sort of risks, but also for the civilian population. Some of these airports are very small, and you shoot a large drone down, it's unpredictable what can happen. So those were the reasons that they gave for not shooting them down, but they did say they were prepared to do so.
So the defence minister has said there's no evidence of Russian involvement. It's also been said they were launched locally. I suppose they could have come along the coast from Kaliningrad, but it's quite a long way. What do we know about where they were launched from, and what indications that has for about whether or not this has some kind of foreign involvement?
Well, there's certainly been speculation since earlier in the week when Copenhagen airport was shut down about boats potentially sort of off the coast of Denmark in the strait between Denmark and Sweden. Three ships particularly were identified. Some of them cargo ships, some of them tankers. Three ships that have various connections to Russia, and there was some speculation that those could have been launch and indeed return sites for the drones as well. But that's also been an area of criticism, as far as I'm aware, that the police were, when that incident was unfolding, were unable to track where the drones were going back to. So it is that does still remain a point of speculation.
And what do you think, what's likely to happen next for Denmark? Are they likely to, is this going to be raised with NATO? Is it going to be considered in tandem with all the other sort of incursions that various flying objects from Russia have conducted over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I believe the quote from the defence minister was that they have reached out to NATO. They're yet to trigger Article 4, as Estonia and Poland have done in recent weeks after, various Russian objects entering their airspace as well. That just means that there are, sort of more serious consultations among the NATO members about what next steps they will take. The Danes are considering that right now. As far as we know, within the last hour or so, there's been a meeting at the Prime Minister's office with, those defence and justice ministers, also the foreign minister and again, the chief of defence. We're yet to hear what's coming out of that, but we'll see what comes to us in the afternoon and whether NATO does get more involved. We're certainly due to have an EU summit in Copenhagen next week, focusing on defence and security and support for Ukraine, starting a week today. And they're determined that will go ahead as planned, but they have said that will be with quite dramatically increased security.
Elizabeth Rushton, thank you very much indeed.